Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 122 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at CUES, the leading talent development solutions provider to the credit union industry. After listening to our show, be sure to register for CUES' new online panel discussion series called Real Talk. You can register at CUES.org/Real Talk. My name is Randy Smith. I am one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and I'm lucky enough to have conversations with the amazing people who make credit unions great, and I get to bring those all to you. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Ray Crouse. Ray is the president and CEO of Parsons Federal Credit Union. I've always enjoyed conversations with Ray in the past. Beyond being the CEO of his credit union, he's also a longtime Nicuso supporter and a board member over there. So we did talk a lot about his credit union being on both coasts. So keeping that culture constant with teams in multiple places, something I know we've all been dealing with here for the past couple of years. We also talked about the importance of CUSOs to the credit union system and what has Ray excited for the future when it comes to technology and beyond for all of us out there. I really enjoyed some of the leadership tips that Ray was willing to share with all of us. Some great insight on working with boards of directors that I'm sure we'll all learn from. We wrapped it all up, as we always do, with some rapid fire questions. I'll tell you, I really enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to see Ray again, hopefully in person soon. So, without further ado, I give you my conversation with Ray Crouse. Enjoy. Ray, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Randy. It's quite an honor to be here. I'm surprised you even called me. But
oh, come on. I'm so excited to have you on, my friend. This is going to be a lot of fun. And I knew there was a bunch of different ways we could take this conversation. You and I known each other from, running around credit union land and through jail. And then we were also on a call through much of this pandemic where I think we all got to know each other even better. So I knew this would be a fun conversation. I'd like to start with something. And when I was thinking about this, I'm like, wow, who better than Ray knows this? Many credit union CEOs have had to deal over the past year and a half now or so with remote employees. You have a team that's in two different sides. You were going back and forth between the West Coast and the East Coast. That's something I know you've had to deal with for quite some time now. Any hacks for all the folks out there still trying to figure it out?
Well, Randy, one of the interesting things was before the pandemic even started, I was already moving back to the East Coast, and I was going to work remote at least 2 weeks out of the month, and then be in our East Coast office and then alternating every other month into our West Coast office as part of a transition we're undergoing. I was really not looking forward to that, to be honest with you. I don't like being around people. And all of a sudden, the pandemic put everybody on a level playing field with that. In fact, from what I understood from my team, I'm seeing you more on Teams than I ever saw you when you were in the office. So we did something a little different. We rotated people out. We divided the team in half and rotated them out every other week. So you could never cross-contaminate, for lack of a better word, into another team. You were forbidden to be in the office during that week you were supposed to be away. That way we thought, thank goodness we never had an incident, believe it or not. But we thought if we had an incident, we didn't lose the whole team because we're a small team. And it worked out very well. One of the things we really had to do is to get people accustomed to using Teams and to tell them, quit with the long emails and use video. No, quit with the long emails. And they want to do what they're comfortable with, but they finally did start seeing long emails, long chat sessions ended up being very inefficient. And sometimes you would get sideways with another employee for no reason other than not being able to read someone, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So we really kept just chipping away about do not call anyone, use video only. And through that, we were able to keep going and have a sense of community and have that personalization. I think that helped us out the most is unfortunately making a mandate video calls only.
I think that's so important because I think of, like, we've all done it before, whether it's in an email or a text message or, some sort of a messaging where we're like, did we read that the wrong way? Was that, when you, and I think we've even probably even over phone calls, but when you can see somebody's face, there's a big difference if you're smiling at each other when, I guess the context of it. I like that. That's pretty good.
Well, that just continues to help us because we're going to have this East Coast, West Coast team. We have 5 people here on the East Coast already in Northern Virginia. And again, we have the group in California. And so it will continue helping us throughout this. So for us to get ready with all this, to hold our culture together and make sure we're doing the right thing through video and through learning how better to communicate, because you have to when you're in 3-hour different time zone. You have literally different people from the East Coast and the West Coast. From a mindset, I won't go there. I won't get myself in trouble on this call.
Right.
What I think those differences are, but my team knows what those differences are.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this too. When you mentioned, having your team separated into kind of the 2 different groups so we weren't cross-contaminating, let's just say, keeping all of them, I would assume, still working together fully as a team and not just like, okay, I'm on the A team, you're on the B team, we only talk to each other, right? I would assume that's, I don't know if a challenge is right, but, mandating what you said, making sure to have these face-to-face conversations seems like.
Yes, I think one of the interesting things we found out, Randy, was our teams wanted to be together. And we had people that just hated working from home, just hated it. And not that they didn't have internet or didn't have a quiet place, just hated the isolation. And so what we were able to do is where we're at toward the end, before we brought everyone back together, we actually went to our sponsor company, and there was, of course, they had vacated the building.
Absolutely.
And we leased space from them in our building in Pasadena. And we said, hey, can we bring people into the second floor? And what we did was we secured 2 or 3 spots above us, and those people came in and worked there, but they were told, do not even cross mingle in the parking lot. But at least we got them out of their house, and they were so happy about that. And they were everyone was really happy when we came back together. We pulled that trigger a little fast. We pulled that trigger in June. A lot of people was wanting to wait through the summer, wait till Labor Day, but our staff wanted it and our team wanted it. And that's what we did. And so far, again, even with the unfortunate rise in the Delta variant, we haven't had any cases yet. So we're very fortunate.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about you're on the Nicuso board, if I'm recalling correctly as well. That's an organization that I've always been a fan of since starting CUInsight. And I guess, so I'd like to ask you, why was it important for you to be a part of Nicuso? And where do you see, this is where I'm really interested to ask you, is where do you see CUSOs fitting into the overall system and the benefit that comes from them?
Oh, yes. Well, definitely Nicuso is near and dear to me. I think I started going to the Nicuso conferences back in 2006 when I was given the opportunity to build CUSOs at my former credit union. And, I show up at this conference, I'm like, what is Nicuso? And everybody was so warm and inviting, but at the same time, they were different. And they had an entrepreneurial spirit. They had, for lack of a better analogy, look outside the box. I mean, it was constant. You were geared toward looking beyond what you were currently doing. There was nothing status quo with this group. And that was when Nicuso was going into a transition of being primarily for financial planning. All the rules came out and you pulled that out of CUSOs because that was what CUSOs were for in the beginning. And it's like the people in CUSO land were reinventing themselves. And it is such a great group of people. The board of Nicuso is fabulous. And I have learned so much, not only from being an entrepreneur, but leadership. I need people to calm me down. I've learned you can be calm and still be entrepreneurial and still drive hard. And there's a lot in that group that helps me learn that. But for the most part, it's how do we look outside the box? How are we aligning with fintechs? What fintechs are we inviting in to talk to us and be part of a Nicuso and come to the conferences? What is the right fit? And you learn very quickly an entrepreneurial that's for-profit driven, period. And that's not CUSOs.
Right. Yeah.
So CUSOs may be for profit, but they are service oriented and trying to find a solution not only for your credit union, but for your member. To me, it's even more to have Nicuso as the focal point to figure out what are the right pieces for my credit union and how do I drive forward. I was thinking about that this weekend. I thought, I really haven't had the opportunity to build a CUSO where I'm at, it's just not found its way to us yet with our size and everything. But I'm using about 6 CUSOs within my organization. So the first thing I do is when my IT guy comes to me or anyone, look into this, and I always point them to a CUSO solution first. It may not always be a CUSO solution, but that's the first place we go is a CUSO solution.
Keep it in the family, right? So, credit union family. Yeah, I love that. To me, I've always thought, and I think even more so today with how fast technology is changing. And I'll ask you this one because I've kind of been that believer, and I've had people try to convince me the other way, and they make great points, but that technology for credit unions can almost be the great equalizer. I've heard others say it can be expensive and it can, totally, hurt the small credit union. But when I look at different CUSOs and the ability that they bring for all of us in credit union land to offer services that maybe we couldn't have offered, that only Bank of America or Chase could have had before,
Yes.
I guess, what's your viewpoint on whether it's CUSOs or technology kind of being an equalizer for credit unions?
I think both. I think CUSOs, and what I'm seeing is all of a sudden there's a momentum in CUSOs also to figure out how to save the smaller credit unions. Now, I hope it gets here soon enough because
Right.
This decline in the interest rate margin has really impacted the smaller credit unions greater. But at the same time, it's very exciting to see how many people are working on initiatives to help the medium-sized and smaller credit unions. I enjoy watching that. I can't wait to see what unfolds in the next 2 years. I think in 2 years, we're going to see a big difference with that. But it's what I think.
So let's look out into the Ray's crystal ball. What has you most excited over the next, say, we'll go with the 2 years, 2 to 5 years, let's say.
Well, Randy, I was always sort of played around a lot in technology. My former credit union, we were the third credit union to start an e-service company back when the web was starting to boom. And I was graciously given the responsibility to start up that e-services group. And it was fun. And I think what is really exciting me going forward over the next 3 to 5 years is you've got to have a trigger mechanism to force a consumer into technology or get them to select technology. And I remember doing something with a biometric kiosk way back before there were ITMs. We built one where I was at. And it really struggled with getting people to use it. But then when I look back, that was before you did self-check-in at airports. That was before you had self-checkout at the grocery stores. Now you have those things and people adopt to ITMs very well. I think the same thing with the pandemic. It taught people, hey, I don't have to drive to a branch. In fact, how many months did I go and it wasn't even open? So it's starting to, reset that. So the next 3 to 5 years, I think it's going to be interesting to see in credit union land what happens branch-wise. I think, from a lending, from making deposits, everything, the key thing of it is how do we shift momentum into the sales aspect of it and be able to effectively do sales and have people comfortable doing business with us that have never even been into one of our locations. But, I'm a virtual credit union also, primarily. We have members all over the world. And so, again, but they also work collaboratively with other engineers all over the world. So, therefore, they're more inclined, oh, yeah, I'll put my money there. But I think across the system, we're going to see a change in the next 3 to 5 years in that regard.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's for sure. You and I had the opportunity, like I mentioned, in the beginning, in the intro, to get to know each other over this pandemic even more. And one of the things that I'll tell you, over the kind of more in the beginning of this year, but I've tried to keep it front and center, going this entire year was for a while there, we all had to be just so reactive, right? Putting out fires. We have to think strategically too for that longer term as leaders. How do you, with everything that's pulling at you, as the CEO of the organization, how do you make that time or keep that space available to yourself to think strategically and not just putting out fires constantly?
Yeah, Well, one thing I try to mandate, you know, sometimes as a leader, you don't want to mandate, but sometimes you got to tell your group, hey, chill out, calm down, have some time. And I do try to enforce a no meeting Friday. I won't tell you how many times I call it. Hey, what are you doing? Oh, we're in a meeting. I thought this was Friday. Well, this was the only time we could meet. But I do try to encourage no meeting Fridays. I think for me, just sitting around reflect, I am very fortunate that I have a wife that understands when I go quiet, I'm not mad. I'm not upset. I'm thinking. She gives me my quiet time. She doesn't sit there. What's wrong? Are you mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Is something bothering you? She understands that that's when I'm thinking. And so that's what I do. I also like when I'm here at this location, my brother and I built our homes on a horse boarding farm. We no longer board horses on it, but we have this land, and I like just going out and walking the land. And that just gives me time to think. I don't need to go hike some big trail. I just go walk and stay in nature. Nature always relaxes me. When we were in Pasadena, my place to go to was Palm Springs. And Lynn and I both just fell in love with the desert for some reason. I never would have known the desert would have such a calming influence on me, but it did. So those are things.
I was laughing to myself here on the other side of the camera because it took a while for Jill to understand in me that me being quiet didn't necessarily mean anything was wrong. It was just, I'm not, Jill, so,
Yeah, I can see that would drive Jill crazy.
Oh, absolutely, right? Like the introvert side of me, like, loves a little bit of just space in my own head. So now she's very good at it, though. She gets it. So, for me, doesn't mean she wants quiet, but so I'm a huge believer in that we're the people that we kind of choose to surround ourselves with really are influential in our lives and our careers. How have those folks that you surround yourself with, helped you along your career journey?
Well, I was very fortunate when I started CUSO land to gather in with about 4 or 5 very influential people in CUSO land. And we still stay in touch. In fact, before COVID hit, we put together one trip together a year. And these are, people that just think outside and all the time and have some very radical thoughts. And it's very interesting for us to get together and feel comfortable that we can throw anything on the table and no one's going to say, are you out of your mind? Because what we're trying to do is get everything out of our mind in our comfort zone. So that has been extremely helpful. It's also a very grounding group. It's a hold you accountable group. If I call one of these individuals up for an opinion and I'm going down a path, they'll let me know right away. That's the wrong path. Now, of course, when I hear that from one, I call another one to make sure. Yeah. And then majority rules.
I've said it multiple times on the show. Like we need those folks who are willing to shoot straight with us. I think of back to building CUInsight and having different ideas. And there were a few people that I would call, and some of them I would kind of throw the idea out there and they'd be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And my response at first was like, oh, but then it would be like, tell me why. Let me get more. And it was like, oh yeah, I wasn't thinking there. Okay. I didn't see that angle, but instantly it's like, okay, now I could make it better, right? Or I can pivot and, do whatever it happens to be. So, yeah.
Randy, one of the things you've got to understand is you may be the CEO, you may be a leader, a high up leader, but you still got to be humble enough to take a difference of opinion and keep yourself from falling into a ravine, right? And once you stop listening to people, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
I couldn't agree with you more. And sometimes that's tough when you're like that A-type trying to build things and used to doing your own thing.
Yes.
So we all know from, being in credit unions, it's not tough to necessarily find the purpose in credit unions of what we're doing, but often, you mentioned it earlier, talking about some of whether it was CUSOs to fintechs, where, if profit's the only, bar that's being measured, sometimes we can all get away from our purpose. How do you make sure you stay connected to that purpose? And how does the credit unions, your members, your team at Parsons, benefit from your purpose, basically?
We had our first, Craig and I came to it, never had a long range plan. They did annual plans, and we had our first long range plan. And right before it, I found out one of the board members was having a problem with their net income dipping. And, I went to him and I've said this to some other credit union CEOs, or, they're just elated that their ROA is over 1% and, it's so higher than peers. And I'm like, what does net income do for our members? And, you'll see a look on people's faces, and my board really got it. I said, we're a financial cooperative, and we have to have net income to keep building our capital and stay strong. But when we have a strong capital position and we're not providing services and product selections to our membership that they're wanting, we're not serving our member. The credit union I went out to run, you probably heard me say this, was on a 10-year membership decline.
Yeah,
and I was saying, in the interview, they said, well, what will you do to control our expenses? And I said, I won't. And I knew then I probably lost the job, right? And I said, your expenses are going to go up. I will find alternative ways to grow the revenue, but the expense growth is going to outweigh the revenue for a little bit because your membership is voting. They don't like what you're doing. That's why they're leaving. And I think that is something for people to continue to think about when you're in credit union land. And sometimes it's hard. It's what is the proper balance of capital, and how much net income do I need, and at what periods do I use it? And I've been very fortunate. Actually, I had an NCUA examiner told my board chair, my supervisory committee chair, you've got this capital. And this is in the beginning when I first went out. You've got this capital. Now's the time to use it to reinvent this credit union. And when he left, they said, did you pay him to say that? And absolutely not. I did not pay an NCUA examiner.
Like, sparked a question in my head, and it's one that I know from talking to other CEOs, and when people become a CEO for the first time, one of the surprises that I've heard from friends that have made that leap was the board relations and dealing with a board, right? Like, as a senior leader in a credit union, the amount of people that were senior leaders became CEOs and were like, I didn't realize how much my CEO shielded me from the board. Like you're talking about now in the interview, like the board was asking about expenses. So to be able to educate the board, and I guess I'll go back to the word hacks, anything for that new CEO or that person who wants to be a CEO someday when it comes to that.
Well, the interesting thing, you cannot underestimate that board relationship. We've had, I'll just say we've had a few outstanding CEOs lose their jobs in the last few years, right? And, it's an unfortunate event, but you are dealing with a volunteer board with different thoughts. And when your actions are not aligning with their thoughts and you don't get both thoughts aligned together, there's problems. And years ago, I was in a 306 group with a guy named Jim Cardwell. In his first meeting, it was all about board governance. I thought, well, this is strange. But 96% of the people coming out of that group became CEOs. And Jim told us a lot about that. And, one of the things he said, don't ever take a CEO job when the former CEO is going to be on the board or involved in any way. And I was like, whoa. And, but he was teaching us that and telling us what to look for. And he's right. And when we started working with my board, they gave me 90 days and then I started making changes. And I will never forget, one is having a great relationship with your board chair. And that I do. I have a fabulous board chair and never gets in the business. We put forth a governance policy in the beginning because they didn't have one. And I really didn't like some things that have been done in the past. And so I wanted to outline whose responsibilities is this and this. And the board, agreed to that. We did have 2 board members left in the first year, but, they weren't on for all this change. The board did come to me and I could tell I was sort of outrunning the headlights a little bit. And I said, okay. And I told them at a board meeting, I'm going to slow down a little bit. And they're like, no, do not slow down. This is on us. Keep going. This is our problem, not your problem. And I'm like, whoa. I mean, that's a mature board to say that. But they knew the issue they were in, and we needed to climb out of it as quick as possible. And, my board, in the board meeting, in the interview, my board chair said, We want you to take us from a mom and pop credit union to professionally run credit union. Well, 2 years later, he's telling the board, Ray has taken us from a mom and pop credit union to professionally run credit union. Now it's the same that we need to do as board members and as a board. That is really good that the board would self-reflect and adjust and everything. So yes, do not underestimate your board. And you'll know through an interview if you have a good connection or not. If you don't have a good connection, really think if you're going to take that job, if it gets offered to you. Or try to figure out why did it not feel good in the interview. I've been very fortunate that my interviews have always just felt like we were all on the same page.
That's really cool. I think that's just great advice. Like I said, to start the question, that's something that I think there's often that surprise. If you're a first time where you're dealing with a board as the focal point, right? Like it doesn't mean your senior leadership doesn't deal with the board from time to time, but they're not you getting the calls before the meeting and after the meeting and all of that. So,
but Randy, I'll tell you this, and I had a lot of experience with my CUSOs because every CUSO had a board. I had 5 board meetings I was going to. I will say this: there are sometimes I have had team members say, "I would never do your job because this board piece I do not want." And you have to sort of self-reflect and say, well, what are they seeing with that? And why do they not like that? And you just have to continue to remind them that the board is there on behalf of the membership, just like we are. If the board is questioning what we want to do, they shouldn't rubber stamp everything we want to do. The board's representing the membership and the net worth of the credit union. And if you don't have a compelling reason why you should do something, you should not expect the board just say, oh, yes, go spend $1 million on that, right?
Yep, absolutely. I'd like to move on to your career journey a little bit. We've been talking about it, but the question I added this year that I just think is fun. Most of us didn't grow up going, someday I want to be a credit union CEO, right? Like as youngsters. So when was that moment in credit unions when you were like, hey, I think I can make a career out of this? Do you remember that? And what did a young Ray want to be when he grew up?
Well, great question. One of the things that, when I was with CUNA, I started out in credit union land with CUNA Mutual. I didn't even know what a credit union was. And I was a finance and banking major in college. And I didn't know what a credit union was. And so anyway, I started out with them, went all over the nation. I still see people that are from those audits I would do across the nation. I was a risk management specialist. And it was really fun. It was like, this thing is pretty neat. And then my first daughter was born. I wanted to get off the road. And I was fortunate enough to find my job starting in the internal audit area at a local credit union. And, went there and been there maybe a couple of years. And I was like, okay, I need to provide, one of those things. You're still young. I need to provide more for my family. And I remember I went to Wachovia Bank, interviewed over there in their internal audit group, because they were here in Winston-Salem. And I said, okay, got the job. And all of a sudden, the warning flags started coming at me as I was trying to get ready to go there. I even turned in my notice.
No kidding. We almost lost you.
Yeah. And then I went back into the credit union and I walked in and the CEO at the time looked at me and said, you want to stay, don't you? I said, how'd you know that? He said, I can tell on your face. I said, yeah, I've made a mistake. And from that day forward, I was all credit unions. When I started building CUSOs, I had so many opportunities to go places and have ownership and stuff, and people wanting to, throw money up and invest in me starting a company. And I just couldn't do it. I love credit unions. And I tell everybody, it's the cleanest business you can be in. The same people that are your owners are who are your customers. There is no conflict when that happens, right? Unless you make a conflict, there's no conflict. So it's just a wonderful, clean business to be in. It's wonderful seeing the difference you make in people's lives. And that's just sort of how it's. But by getting a job outside the credit unions, when I figured out the credit unions were for me.
That was for you. What'd you want to be when you were growing up as a kid?
I was destined to be a doctor.
Oh.
I did medical explorers. I took Latin. I did anatomy when no one did anatomy back then. Biology, advanced biology, chemistry, all that. I had a grandmother that, it was her dream to have a doctor in the family. And grandmother was going to pay the whole way. There was not going to be any medical school debt. That didn't work.
You didn't go there. No. Well, we're glad to have you in credit unions. What was the inspiration to become president and CEO of Parsons Federal Credit Union?
When the recruiter called me and said, I've got the perfect opportunity for you, quite honestly, I'd been consulting for a couple of years, and my wife had told me that she wanted to live somewhere where she could walk everywhere. And I did a consulting job out in Pasadena, California, and literally called her and said, I just found our town. 2 months later, I had a recruiter call me and tell me, I've got the perfect opportunity for you. And it was a building opportunity. This credit union was going to need to build it. And I'm a builder, Randy. When it's status quo, I'm bored. And you don't want Ray bored, because then, Ray starts dreaming of things to do that maybe we shouldn't do when Ray gets bored. Anyway, it was a building opportunity. It was, interviewing with the board was fabulous. Our sponsor company is one heck of a company. I mean, with everything they're into with military intelligence and software and cybersecurity, in addition to building bridges and roads all over the world, just a fascinating place to work. And that's what attracted me to it. So I don't know if you know this, within 30 days, my wife and I, we had one daughter graduate undergrad, one daughter graduate high school, and we moved to the opposite side of the country.
All within a month.
So all our friends said, you did empty nesting right. You just got out of town.
Just sold the house and went, right? So that's, I had never been to Pasadena up until a few months ago, and it's a beautiful city to walk around. Jill actually had some work there, and I just went for the ride, and so I had time during the day to walk around. It was absolutely gorgeous. So
we loved it. I'll just say, when the board said, well, you probably should go back east, won't you like that? I went, So, because our sponsor company moving their headquarters to Northern Virginia, sort of put us in this transition. Yeah, I had a lot of other things on my list I wanted to go visit while we were out west, but that didn't occur. It's going to have to wait till the end of my career, I guess.
Yeah, get back out there. Is there something your team has heard you say so many times they can finish your sentence?
Absolutely. So I'd been there probably about the end of my 90 days. I came up with a thing and I said, remove hurdles, say yes, smile. And they will all tell you. In fact, sometimes we do have core values.
Yeah.
But they think the core values sometimes is remove hurdles, say yes, smile. And when I say yes, if you're in a position of saying no to a member, you keep bouncing that up, even if it gets to me. I should be a final no. So we are trying, we have very low delinquency. We have good capital position. So, we can do this, and we have a great membership base. But the other thing was smile. I couldn't believe how no one smiled in the office. And I couldn't believe how our members would walk in and not smile. And it was like, is this California? I'm trying to figure it out. And so I told everybody, even if they were in the back office and they walked through somebody in the lobby, they were to say hello and smile.
And smile.
Well, one day I'm walking out with two people to go to lunch, and I meet this member, and you know how people have this face like, don't you dare look at me. So I'm like, uh-oh, I'm getting ready to be tested. And I said, good afternoon, how are you? And it shocked them, and they just had this big smile on their face.
Oh, you have to smile.
Someone had spoken to them. So I think when we started that, but most of our interactions are over the phone, and we've really let our staff know they can sense your smile over the phone. In fact, I have a board member that was a radio broadcast major, and he's a recruiter, and he has a mirror beside his monitor. And I said, what's the mirror for? And he goes, because ever how you're looking is how you're sounding.
Out of college, I worked for Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, and you made a whole lot of cold calls.
Yes.
And our sales manager put mirrors on everybody's desk on your computer monitor, because it was like that idea of 100 calls in, you better still be smiling because people could hear it, right? Like, so he always said smiling and dialing. So I've actually heard that before. So is there a myth about being a great leader that you just think is dead wrong and you'd be like happy to never hear again?
I think the only thing that happened to me that sort of went against my value system was, I went to help my daughter, her school, actually, our local fair, fall fair, would go, and they got paid to clean up after the fair, to clean the grounds. And I went with her one night on a Sunday night. And the next day, my boss said, well, hey, what'd you do fun this weekend? I said, oh, I went to the fair. And he went, you did what? And he said, what were you thinking? What if somebody had seen you? And it sort of just snapped me. I went, what? And he goes, yeah, you're an executive now, and you shouldn't be seen doing things like that. So I went and bought the book Executive Presence, and I read down through it, and my wife and I have spent the night at the local homeless shelter helping out and stuff like that. And I'm like, wait a minute, am I doing this wrong? And in the end, I went, no, I'm not doing this wrong, and especially not if I'm in credit union land.
Absolutely.
Servitude goes beyond serving our members. It goes into serving the general public too. And I thought I was giving my daughter an example. There was nothing wrong with me out picking up trash. In fact, nothing wrong with that at all to sort of put yourself back into reality every now and then, correct?
I couldn't agree with you more, my friend. Outside of credit unions, what do you and Lynn do to recharge? What does work-life integration look like to you?
We try to do just a lot of little fun ventures. And as you're well aware, some of my friends call me the traveling CEO with all the traveling I do. And Lynn's always with me. We're fortunate enough that she can go, and we're headed up to Northern Virginia tomorrow. But, just got back from California last week. So we do a lot of that. But I'll just say I did get a little fun toy. So I had been waiting for all my kids to be off the payroll. When they came off the payroll, I ordered me a car, and Lynn and I like driving in that car.
You got a new Corvette, didn't you? Did Jill tell me that? Yeah. Oh, that's fun. Yeah. I had a convertible when I lived in South Carolina, and the Blue Ridge Parkway. I highly recommend it. Just taking the drive through there.
Yeah, we're waiting to go up there, but we just go find places, no matter how far it is. Let's go for brunch.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. That's fantastic. Congratulations, my friend. That's good fun there. So it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience podcast without a few rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. So, is there something in life that you said no to that you're sure glad you did because, things would have probably turned out different?
Yes. Right when I had rotated in to help our mortgage area where I was at previously, when the e-services opportunity arose, and the VP of mortgage wanted me to stay in there and be the mortgage underwriting manager, which was back then, that area was the hot area. And the CEO said, it's up to you. I want you to go run these services, start this, but you can go do that if you want. And I was glad I chose e-services.
I like that. Is there maybe it's the Corvette, is there a recent purchase that you didn't know you needed, but now you can't imagine living without? I know during COVID, it seemed like everybody was getting Pelotons and puppies, right?
Well, we did get a Peloton.
You got a Peloton.
In fact, we have one here and one in Northern Virginia. That's how stuck on Peloton we are. So I never really liked to work out. My workout wanted to be out working on the farm, walking, hiking, but I have really enjoyed the Peloton, I will have to say. And there's a lot of creative people on there. We have some taglines on there that we keep track of each other. So
it does seem like a bunch of folks got into it. We almost pulled the trigger on one of those, and we're like, but wait a minute, we travel. That's like what we like to do. We don't need something that's stuck here. So
yeah, that's the only thing when we travel. That's why Lynn was actually the one that ordered the one for Northern Virginia. I was like, you did what?
It's like, hey, if we're going to do this, got to stay healthy, right? So what was young Ray like in high school, and did you get any memorable trouble you could share with us?
Oh, I was probably always in trouble. I will tell you this, so we'll get back to me. I was supposed to be a doctor. So we had in-school suspension. And one time in senior high school, I got suspended from my English teacher. She didn't like something I said. Imagine that. So I had to go to in-school suspension. Well, it was while we were dissecting a cat.
Oh,
so the fun part was every day I would order my cat up so I could sit in in-school suspension and dissect it. And all these rough students, right, that were in there for fighting or in there for smoking or whatever, they're in there about to get sick. And I'm in there just cutting them and doing my cat. And finally, I got released from in-school suspension early because they didn't want me bringing that cat in there anymore.
That's funny. The surgeon. So, that's a good story. So what are you currently reading? And is there a book that you've gifted others, or you just think everybody should read?
Yeah, well, first of all, I decided last spring, and it was something, in working with Jill and talking to people about social inequities and everything, I decided, okay, I'm reading a lot of books about that, but I want to go back to the basics about how we're supposed to treat each other. And so I'm actually reading the Bible.
All right, you went back to the Bible. There you go.
I'm in the Bible, and I only read, and it's going to take me forever because I'm reading one chapter every morning. So about 7 o'clock in the morning, I read one chapter, and I sit there and try to feed that chapter into current events.
That's interesting.
And I've also I finally had to buy a Bible study guide to sort of make sense out of it.
Was that something you cleared time for? You said you're doing it like every morning at 7 o'clock.
I do not turn on my computer or anything until I've read through that chapter, spent time in it, underlined in it. I always thought you shouldn't ever write in a Bible, but everyone does. So I had to cringe a little bit and start learning to underlining it and everything. And so that's what I'm doing in that regard today. On what book I gift. The book I have gifted the most is a book called The Speed of Trust with Stephen Covey. And man, I love that. And it just teaches you, if you don't trust one another, it slows the organization down tremendously. Even though I'll have people come to me, well, so-and-so, da-da-da-da. I'm like, have you talked to them? No. Well, do you remember Speed of Trust? You need to go talk to them. If you can't get resolution, then both of you come to me. And so the Speed of Trust book, I think it's one of the best. I never really read fiction much. I read so much business-wise. I'm tired of reading. But from a business book standpoint, that's been my favorite book.
That's a good one. That's for sure. It's going to be added to the list. So the random question, what's the greatest album of all time?
Oh, gosh. If you saw my playlist, you would think, what is wrong with this guy? I have so many genres. My kids look at my playlist and say, what are you doing? Listen to this. But I think I was trying to think, okay, what song is really helping me at this point, or words? And it's actually George Strait. And his album is Love Is Everything. And he's got a song called When the Credits Roll. And in that, it says, one of the things that he keeps singing is, when the curtains come down, I wonder what the critics will say. And so my curtain will be coming down.
Hopefully not too soon, right? You have to
not too soon, but
you're extending the years.
It's closer than it was.
Right. Yeah. All of ours is, that's for sure. I just have to ask, people will be able to tell when we're recording this, but I think Jill told me y'all went to the Stones concert. Did you see Mick Jagger was out just having a beer in Charlotte and nobody even knew he was there?
When we were standing in line at the hotel to check in, the guy in front of us showed us that. And that dive bar that he was at,
yep.
I don't know if you've seen it. It's the guy wouldn't sell the property, and they literally built a modern apartment around it.
Yep, I know exactly
we drove by it to see it. But Mick Jagger, I looked at Lynn, I said, you think I can be that way at 78? She goes, oh, God, I hope not. I mean,
yeah, too much energy.
When he would run back and forth on the stage, it was just, you had to keep reminding yourself, the guy is 78 years old.
It's absolutely amazing. I think on Netflix or Amazon Prime, there's a Keith Richards documentary that I just watched in the past couple of weeks. And it not only, we're all amazed that guy's still alive, right? But it's still amazing how much they're doing at 78 years old, right?
No,
so it's kind of crazy. There's one question I didn't send you in advance. When you hear the word success, who is the first person who comes to mind and why?
Wow. Well, it sort of goes back to a book I read, is Warren Buffett. So I read his Snowball book and about everything that got him along the way. When you read success, look how much is pointed to that guy.
Yeah.
Any kind of market situation, anything he does is under a microscope. So I really, from an old line financial guru, it's Warren Buffett. But for the Howard Hughes of our time, it is Elon Musk.
Yeah, he is thinking, isn't he? He
Yes.
has big dreams, that's for sure. And making them happen, quite honestly. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah, I get you. Good answers. Thanks, Ray, again for being on the show, my friend. The last question that I have for you, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners or an ask that you have of them?
I would just say, if you're out there, just remember in a leadership possibility is to take in as much as you can, to learn how an organization pieces together. So any experience you can get that helps you with that, I took the lowest paid job I was offered out of college because I had a finance professor said, go take that job and it will teach you how all the pieces of the organization fit together. And that will carry with you throughout your career. And guess what? It has. So do any experience that helps you know across the organization, not just in your little area.
That's great advice. Thank you again, my friend. We will link to everything we talked about in the show notes today. Ray, if people have more questions of you, what's your poison? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn? How do they get a hold of you?
Email, but be very patient with my response time.
I love it. That's right. So have a great day, my friend. I hope you are well and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Okay. Thank you, Randy.
Before we go, I would just like to take a quick minute to thank all of you for listening today and allowing us to have so much fun doing what we do. Once again, a big thank you to Ray for being on the show and taking time out of his schedule to share those lessons he's picked up over his career with all of us. And a big thank you to our sponsor, CUIs. Don't forget to register for CUIs' new online panel discussion series, Real Talk. That can be done over at CUIs.org/Real Talk. Two more things. Subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're there. And finally, check out the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. You'll be able to go find your next great read and get suggestions from the guests on our show. Thank you all again for listening. I hope you have a great day and be well, friends.